Hey everybody. Today we're going to be doing evaluating expressions. Expression. Now an expression is another type of math statement, okay? An equation is different from an expression in that an equation has an equal sign. And you see that expressions, all of these are expressions, they do not have an equal sign, right? Some of them are just a times b times c, a plus b plus c. And so when we evaluate expressions, what we're doing is we are, right, just the expressions by themselves, they're kind of these unknown, they're left in terms of variables, right? But what the directions do is they define for us what the value of those are. And it's our job to say, okay, if every time I see an a, that's equal to a 4, if every time I see a b, that's equal to 2, and c is equal to -1, it's my job to plug in or substitute in those values for each respective letter and evaluate, right? Because there's going to be some simplifying to do after I substitute in those specific letters or numbers, okay? Number one here, a plus b plus c. Okay, so we are going to be, again, first step, substituting in each value. So every time I see a letter A, I'm going to plug in a 4, okay? So instead of a plus b plus c, it's going to be 4 plus b, and every time I see a b, I'm going to put in a 2, so 4 plus 2 plus, and then c is -1, right? So don't miss the -1. So I do 4 plus 2 plus -1. Okay, so it can be difficult to add three things at once. So let's just do 2. 4 plus 2, 4 plus 2 is 6. And then, so I combine these two, then I think 6 plus -1. Again, the parentheses aren't super important here, so I can just drop those off. 6 plus -1. Okay, now that can be different. Some of you guys were probably taught to say plus negative, and you can think of it like that. Another way to think of this is just 6 minus 1. When you add a negative, that's the same as subtracting. So this is the same as 6 minus 1, and 6 minus 1 is 5. So after evaluating this expression with all these values, you get 5 as an answer. Okay, and that's it. So all of these are going to result in just a single number as an answer. And just for the directions, all of these are going to use these same values for A, B, and C. You notice I defined a separate set of values for A, B, and C in the second set of problems, but for these, it's all going to be 4, 2, and negative. Now, number 2, A, B, C. Nice. Makes me think of the Jackson 5 song, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Classic. Anyway, A, B, C. So, again, it's not showing it here, but there's multiplication happening. A times B times C. Okay, so, again, I'm going to substitute in 4 for A, 2 for B, and there's multiplication in between these. Don't forget that. And then -1 in for C. Okay, so really what I'm doing is I'm multiplying 4 times 2 times -1. And so let's do that again, same with the adding. Let's multiply 2 at a time. So 4 times 2 is 8, and then 8 times a -1. 8 times -1, well, that's just a -8, okay? Now, number three, 2 times the group A plus B minus C, okay? And I haven't mentioned it yet because we haven't really needed it for the first two, but what I need to remember here is my order of operations, okay? This is something you would have learned, okay? Let me just write up the acronym up here. You might have heard PEMDAS with a P there for parentheses. I prefer the letter G for group, a group of terms. That's a little bit more, covers all the different categories that fit into that first group, like the top of a fraction might not be in parentheses, but that's still considered a group, okay? Or like underneath a radical sign might not be in parentheses, but it's still a group. So I prefer the letter G there, but right, groups, exponents, multiplication, and division. And it's also important to know that even though it's in order like this, these are together. That's kind of the same step, okay, as well as addition and subtraction are both together in the same step. So multiplication doesn't necessarily come before division. It can, but not always. And then addition doesn't necessarily come before subtraction either. But before we worry about that, let's substitute in these values. So again, everywhere I see a letter A, I'm going to put in 4 and so on, okay? So this is going to say 2 times, instead of A plus B in this group, it's going to be 4 plus 2. Again, that's just in this group here, so you see I just replaced that. And then outside of the group is minus c, so that's minus a negative 1. So my first thing is g, so I look for any groups or parentheses or just groups to combine first. And I have that, right? I have in this group 4 plus 2. And that 4 plus 2 gives me a 6, okay? So this combines to give me 6 in this group, okay? And then everything I didn't change just comes right down, okay? So this is 2 times that 6, and then minus negative 1, okay? So then 2 times 6 minus negative 1, okay? So next in order of operations is exponents, okay? Because I took care of my groups. I don't have any exponents in here, right? Those would be those little numbers up top there, but I don't have any of those. So I can skip right down to multiplication and division, okay? Do I have any of that going on? Yes, I do. I have this 2 times 6 right here out in front. So I can do 2 times 6 is 12, and then minus negative 1, okay? So that took care of that third tier, that multiplication and division. So I move on to the last tier, addition and subtraction, okay? And so 12 minus negative 1, and that can be tricky, okay? You might remember too, minus a negative is the same as adding. So this is really 12 plus 1, okay? And that's a lot easier to know what the answer is. So 12 plus 1 gives me 13, okay? So there we go. Okay, 13. Now this last one, number 4, a squared minus b squared minus c squared. Okay, so let's substitute everything in. So 4 squared minus 2 squared minus negative 1 squared. Okay, now here we go. Lots of exponents here, right? That's what these are, exponents. Okay, so I don't have any groups, right? Because these are all kind of individual terms. So I can skip that one. I move on to exponents, and I have those here. And so what that means is I'm going to square all of these numbers before I subtract them, right? Because exponents comes before subtraction. So I do 4 squared. Again, that just means the number times itself. 2 of those multiplied together. So 4 times 4 would be 16. Okay, and then minus 2 squared, or 2 2's multiplied together. And so that is 2 times 2 is 4. And then minus negative 1 squared. So that is 2 negative 1's multiplied together. So that is negative 1 times negative 1. And negative 1 times negative 1 gives me a positive 1. But it's still being subtracted, right? The subtraction is still there. This is just going to simplify to a positive 1. Okay, so I have 16 minus 4 minus 1. So 16 minus 4, let's just do that first. 16 minus 4 is 12. Minus 1, I bring that down, so 12 minus 1 is 11. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'll show you here how you do these. If you went about it yourself already, awesome, you can check your answers. Okay, so we're going to substitute in a different set of values to plug in here, right? 9 times negative 2, b number times the c number minus the a number squared. And the a number is negative 6, so minus negative 6 squared. And now I need to refer to my order of operations because there's a lot going on here, okay? Are there any groups, right? The giveaway there would be parentheses, okay? Or again, fractions or multiple things under a radical, like I said, but there are no groups here that need to be done first before any other, so I can skip that. Now, exponents. I do have an exponent, right? So that gets taken care of before anything else. So negative 6 squared, again, that's negative 6 times negative 6. And so that gives me a positive 36. So I did my exponents. Now, tier 3, I look for multiplication and division, okay? I do have that, right? 9 times negative 2. And 9 times negative 2 is negative 18 minus 36. So that took care of my multiplication. And there's no division, so I'm good there. And now addition and subtraction, my last step. I do have subtraction here, right? Negative 18 minus 36 more. Again, you could use a calculator because I know that's tricky. You would get negative 54. Okay. Number 2, again, first step, substitute in. And so this is a group, right? But a minus c, okay, so it's going to be negative 6 minus negative 2. Okay, lots of little negatives in there, minuses, right? So we'll deal with that. and then plus b times c. So that's plus 9 times negative 2. A minus c in my parentheses or in my group, right? So that's going to come first. So negative 6 minus negative 2. Let's get rid of these parentheses in here just because that does make it a little bit trickier. I just like to use them when I first substitute in. Negative 6 minus negative 2. Again, I said in a previous problem that you could change minusing a negative. When you have two negatives right next to each other, you could change that to, say, negative 6 plus 2, right? Minus negatives turns into a plus. So I got negative 6 plus 2, and that's going to equal a negative 4. Okay, negative 4. Okay, so that's first there. So negative 4 is what that group turns into, plus this 9 times negative 2. Okay, and then so that's my groups. I don't have any exponents, so multiplication and division. So 9 times negative 2. So negative 4, that turns into 9 times negative 2, negative 18. Okay, so I got negative 4 plus negative 18, and then that takes me to some addition, or again, you could rewrite this as negative 4 minus 18, and that is negative 22. Okay, either way you do it, you should end up with a negative 22. Okay, number 3, so I got the square root of b, and again, let's plug in. So the square root of negative 9 minus a times c, so minus negative 6 times negative 2. Okay, here I have a radical, the square root of 9. Okay, technically a radical is the same as saying 9 to the 1/2 power. I actually deal with that the same step as I deal with exponents. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Again, it doesn't really matter because these are kind of separate, but it is helpful to think radicals are in that exponent group. Okay, so square root of 9. So again, you're thinking what times itself equals 9? And that would be 3. The square root of 9 is 3 minus this negative 6 times negative 2. If I had another term under the radical with the b, I would consider that to be a group, and I would do that first. Okay, but I didn't, so I'm good doing it like I did. Okay, so now I do this multiplication right here. Negative 6 times negative 2 would be positive 12. Okay, but it's not 3 plus 12 because this was being subtracted. So this subtraction remains, but I'm subtracting. It was negative 6 times negative 2, so that equals 12. So this kind of simplified to a positive 12 that is being subtracted from the 3. Okay, so 3 minus 12, and that takes me down to my last step, which is to subtract 3 minus 12, negative 9. Now, big one, last one, number 4, 3a minus 2bc plus a squared. Okay, so let's get all those values in there first. Yikes, that's a lot. Okay, but we'll, again, one step at a time. Gee, do I have any groups? No, I don't. Again, you might say, oh, that's a group, isn't it? It is one term, but it's not in parentheses, so I don't need to do that necessarily before I do any of the other ones. Okay, so I don't have any groups. Exponents. I do have a little exponent here on the very end. Okay, so I'm going to deal with that right now. And so that is negative 6 squared. And so negative 6 squared, or negative 6 times negative 6, gives me positive 36. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite all this down, but I'm going to say that instead of plus negative 6 squared, I'm going to write plus 36. Okay, and so now exponents took care of it. Multiplication and division. I actually have 3 multiplications going on. Okay, so I got this 3 times negative 6. And so that is negative 18. So this would be 2 times 9. 2 times 9, 18. And then 18 times negative 2. 18 times negative 2 would give me negative 36. So this would be negative 36 plus 36. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this minus negative to a plus, because that minus negative is confusing. So negative 18 plus 36 plus 36. Okay. So it took care of my multiplication. Now addition and subtraction. Okay, so that it's all being added together, right? Negative 18 plus 36 gives me positive 18. Okay, and then 18 plus 36 gives me 54. There we go. Okay, so those are some simple evaluating some expressions. Okay, like I said, I am going to have a video to doing this on Desmos. Okay, because that's what my students use, and that's it. So I hope that made sense to you. Thanks.